Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this rainy morning.
And I am indebted to all of you for opening my world to this wonderful author.
Although not in optimal condition, the Second Atomic War completely destroyed this region of the planet. Paleographers are convinced that it is the only known copy of 100 Years of Solitude, circa 1967, the great mythological saga of the ancient dwellers of Latin America. The discovery has been hailed as a unique event, although it was known that the inhabitants of this region of the world venerated the teachings collected in this book, the natural heir to the Bible or the Quran. Many skeptics had doubted of its existence. Close quote. Half-jokingly, Volpi underscores the textual sacralization to which García Márquez's masterwork was subjected.
Muchos años después, frente al pelotón de fusilamiento, el coronel Aureliano Buendía había de recordar aquella tarde remota en que su padre lo llevó a conocer el hielo.
Satirical essay by García Márquez called The USSR, 22,400,000 square kilometers without a single Coca-Cola ad.
We separated a year later and finalized the divorce in 1979. She took her copy of 100 Years of Solitude, and I had mine.
The magic continues to be wrought. I'm not sure this is working. It's working.
I remember one, sadly, lovely guy named Conche that everybody loved. I think he was part of the family.
When I'm gone, I may come back. If I cannot bear the solitude of death, just like Melquiades.
He was called the Chinese Gabo at the moment. He was really happy to be labeled as Chinese Gabo. And then later on, after he got Nobel Prize, he said, I'm not happy anymore with this label. I prefer you guys call me Chinese Moyen.
The influence of García Márquez on me at that time was, as I said before, more ideological, more from a historical perspective, perhaps more political.
Just cutting to the chase and saying the fatalism that you see in the works of García Márquez, to me, are a metaphor for the role that ideology plays in maintaining historical dependence.
Los angelitos que le pido a Dios, que caso tienen en el firmamento. Los angelitos que le pido a Dios. Ay, el que no vuela no sube. Ay, el que no vuela no sube ya.
So we have two more speakers. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ruben Palayo, our colleague here at Southern. Ruben has devoted much of his professional life to writing about Gabriel García Márquez. He was able to get to spend a substantial amount of time with him, an experience he says was the pinnacle of his professional career. He first met Gabo upon being invited to his house as a guest, rather than as an interviewer, in 2012 on Bastille Day. He met him again to share dinner with him and his wife Mercedes, and a year later he was actually able to take a stroll with the couple in Mexico City. For him, these meetings were, as he says, magically real. I was thinking as Anibal was reading his talk about religion, it occurred to me that I do know some great worshipers of Gabriel García Márquez, and Ruben Palayo is one of those worshipers. He has a literal obsession with Gabriel.
García Márquez was Clinton's favorite fiction writer. Let me share with you a little anecdote of how they met. William Styron, the great American writer who died in Martha's Vineyard, had a house in Martha's Vineyard, and he was having a dinner party, and his friend Carlos Fuentes, a great Mexican writer, was invited by Styron to come to the party. And Styron asked him, Fuentes asked Styron if he didn't mind if he brought a friend. And he said, well, if it is your friend, of course, how would I mind? The friend was García Márquez. And when the party is ongoing, there were other people invited, the owners of the New York Times were there. And when they engaged in conversation, Gabo asked Clinton, is it true that you said that your favorite book is 100 Years of Solitude? And Clinton said, yes, it is true. I said that. And Gabo said, sure. You said that because you wanted the Hispanic vote. And Clinton, who was very fond of, I guess, of Gabo and jokes of that nature, of that size, said, no, I said that because it is true. And he started to recite the opening paragraph that a couple of my colleagues have read here today. That's how they met. But for those of you that know even much more than that, it was Clinton who lifted the ban against García Márquez of stepping foot on American soil. For several decades, García Márquez was not allowed to stop in the United States, even though we read and studied his books in American colleges.
So Edith Grossman is expecting that Ruben will introduce her, but it's actually going to be me. Just as I accused Ruben of being a worshiper of Gabo, as an aspiring I translate, and Edith Grossman is a person I look up to very much, so it's quite an honor for me to be able to introduce you. So thank you, Ruben, for allowing me to do it. And thank you, Edith, for being here with us today. Edith Grossman is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most widely known and celebrated literary translators of our time. In addition to her translation work, Grossman is a literary critic and occasionally a teacher of literature in Spanish. She was born in Philadelphia, attended the University of Pennsylvania and the University of California at Berkeley, completed her PhD at New York University, and has been the recipient of awards and honors including the Fulbright, the Woodrow Wilson, the Guggenheim Fellowships, the Penn Ralph Maiden Medal for Translation, an award in literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Queen Sophia Translation Prize, the Independent Foreign Fiction Prize, and inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences.
Happier than I can tell you that you folks have put together with Ruben's leadership a tribute to one of the major novelists of the 20th century. I plan to focus on an essential line of influence acquired by means of translated books that runs from Miguel de Cervantes to William Faulkner to Gabriel García Márquez. But first I'd like to clarify a crucial point. I don't intend the word influence to serve as a synonym for imitation. On the contrary, for me it suggests a source of inspiration, an almost serendipitous encounter with a solution even before the problem has been fully articulated and is still unformulated. An excellent example of this phenomenon is found in García Márquez's memoir, Living to Tell the Tale, when he recalls his initial reading of James Joyce's Ulysses, a book in translation he was first introduced to by a friend who told him, as García Márquez put it, with the authority of a bishop, "This is the other Bible," end quote. At first he dismissed the book, reading it, as he says, quote, in bits and pieces and fits and starts, until I lost all patience. It was premature brashness. Then García Márquez tells us, quote, years later, as a docile adult, I love that phrase. One of the wonderful things about not being an adult is that you are not docile. As a docile adult, I set myself the task of reading it again in a serious way. And it not only was a discovery of a genuine world that I never suspected inside me, but it also provided invaluable technical help to me in freeing language and in handling time and structures in my books. End quote. The influence of Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra, the indisputable creator of a modern literary language and a modern literary genre. I do mean Spanish and the novel. Is so profound and so widespread that attempting to track it in a complete and thorough way would take more time than any of us have at our disposal. But I'll give you a thimble-sized synopsis. And I'm sure a whole lot of you know this already, so forgive me for preaching to the choir. Part 1 of Don Quixote was published in 1605, Part 2 in 1615. Translations into other European languages followed very quickly, considering that this happened in the early 17th century. The first of them was Thomas Shelton's English translation in 1612 of Part 1. His translation of Part 2 appeared in 1621. Ensuing contemporary versions included the French, 1614, the Italian, 1622, and the German, 1621, though it was incomplete and not actually published until 1648.